Okay, I
Okay.
just want to thank this
Yeah.
Sasson family again for sponsoring the series in the memory of their father, Albert Sasson, by Jacob and Joseph. So thank you. Okay, Bakasha, Dr. Mark.
Thank you. And I want to thank a well-known Talmud Chacham. I don't think he's spoken for Torah Moshe, Rabbi Yosef Gavriel Beckhofer.
That is correct.
Okay, well, so he's been listening to the classes and sending me comments, so I thank him. And I thought I was clear, but I want to make it clear if I didn't say it, that when it used to be in Israel that the chief rabbis were appointed, and it was for life, like Rav Cook, Rav Herzog, and then well, Rav Unterman it would have been, but then they wanted Rav Goren in, so they made it like a 10-year term, and since then it's been terms. Although traditionally, you appoint a rabbi, he's there for his life. So if I didn't make that clear, thank you, Rabbi Beckhofer. And if you recall, I told you about the interesting view of the Rogachover. We saw about Tevilas Kalim, that if you buy it from like a company, you don't need to do tefillah, an unusual view. I had this, but I haven't gotten around to telling you. But there's another unusual view of the Rogachover. It's one of the only things of the Rogachover anyone can understand. It's not so complicated. If you look at his Chuvos, number 184, he says that there's no concept of ribis, interest with a bank. That is like Mizrahi Bank or something like that. They have to have Heter Iska. They have to do all these things. I say it's a Jewish bank. The Rogachover also says there's no such thing. A bank is it's not an individual. If there's no individual here, it's its own, like a corporation. It's its own private entity. The bank is not Jewish, he holds, and therefore there's no the individuals. It's not their money. That is the people who control the bank. Um, and there's no ribis then he holds. So I just like with the Tvilas Kalim, that view is also, as far as I know, not an accepted view. You have to read his language. He says that a bank is it's not lo nikra davar mesuyam rak davar shal tsura lo chomer. I mean, we need a whole class to explain this. He says if you have gam misha yesh lahem bank him enam meshubadim lo atzmam rak hakesef humunach sham. That is, the person who runs the bank, he's not the bank. The bank is the money, and the money doesn't belong to him, and therefore he says it's not. It's ribis is only when an individual lends you money, not the bank. Um, okay, I thank you, Rabbi Mordechai pointed something out. I don't know how I made this mistake, or maybe I do know. I'll explain to you. I was talking about Rabbi Mazuz and at his funeral, and I said that they sang the song, the Chazan, the Piyut, and it's Lacha Eli Teshukati. And I, for some reason, said a lie, which it's not, obviously. And why would I say a lie? Shukati. We're talking about God, but I think I know why I did actually, and because Rav Mazuz, one of the things that he always stressed is the necessity of learning grammar, learning dikduk, and he has an example that he says again and again of a great rabbi who didn't know dikduk and then made a mistake, and it has this word a lie. So let me share it with you here. It's in this pasuk in Shmos, Chaf Dalid, I believe it's Chaf Dalid 24. Um, let's see, where is it here? Yes, verse 12. It says, Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, God says to Moshe, Ale Eli, that's the word Eli, Hahara. Um, come up to me into the mountain. Veheyesham, and be there. Okay, so you have this interesting word, Hahara. The the Ger Rebbe, and this is quoted by Rav Yitzchak Yedidia Frankel, asked the question. He wants to know what's this Hahara? Why not just Hahar? Why does it say Hahara? And he calls attention to Psalms chapter 9. let's see, verse 18. What does it say? Yashuvu Rishaim Lisha'ola. The wicked will return to the netherworld. So the Yerushalmi asks, so what's this Lishola? Why does it say Lishola with the extra hey at the end? And let me read it to you. The Yerushalmi in Yavamo says that Lishola means to the bottom level of hell, the netherworld. And therefore, the Ger Rebbe says, oh, same thing over here, Alei Ayahara. It means that you'll go to the Madrega, the highest Madrega of the mountain. Rav Mazuz says it's completely wrong. It's showing a lack of Hebrew grammar. That Hahara doesn't mean Hahara. The hey at the end just means two. So Hahar, the mountain, the hey at the end, to the mountain. That's all it means. This pasuk in Tehillim, the Yerushalmi had a question. Why does it say Yashuvu Rishaim Lisholah? You already have the lamed in front. So it should just be Yashuvu Rishaim either Sha'ola or Lisha'ol. Why does it say Lisha'ola? And that's why they make a drasha there that it means it stresses two twice. The lamed and hey, it means to the lowest level. But Rav Mazuz, and he gives this as an example a lot of something which is like a simple grammatical point, and it was stated incorrectly. In fact, it's in Rashi actually. If you look in Rashi and Breshis, chapter 14, it's pasuk 10. It's right there. Rashi explains the word hara is the same as lehar, so there's really no reason to make that mistake. But so maybe that's why I said a lie. Another point before we begin, I want to mention I listened to the class from last week, and I look, there's a lot to speak about Rabbi Mazuz. I'm not going to spend the time. Maybe we'll do future classes on him. People wanted to know who's going to take over the yeshiva. Well, he has sons-in-law. I mean, they're not at his level, and although they're broad in terms of Torah, they're not going to be quoting Bialik or anything like that. So I assume that's the case. He has a brother-in-law who's a very controversial figure, Rav Yitzhak Barda, Rosh Yeshiva. Let me show you a picture of him, actually. He's definitely not going to be taking over the yeshiva. He has crazy ideas about, he holds that, here's a picture of him. Hold on a second. He holds that in Eretz Yisrael, not that everyone should follow the Shulchan Aruch, everyone should follow the Rambam. He's a Rosh Yeshiva in Ashkelon, and he's a posek. He has institutions. His whole shita is that you have to follow the Rambam in Eretz Yisrael, not the Shulchan Aruch. And he's the brother-in-law of Rav Mazuz. He married Rav Mazuz's sister. So and Rav Avad Yosef goes off on him. So he's not going to take over the yeshiva. That's for sure not. I'll tell you something interesting, though, about Rav Barda. He named one of his sons Rava, Resh Bet Aleph, like the Amora. And he says that his son is the first person ever named Rava since the Amora Rava. As far as I know, no one's been named Abaya yet, but it's an interesting name. So he's Rabbi Rava Barda, and I don't know why that name sort of fell out of fashion. You got to be a little brave, though, I think, to give your kid a name that no one else has. That maybe he'll be teased or something. But I think people might have got the impression because I gave you an example of Rav Mazuz giving an interpretation of the Gemara, of the Mishnah, different than the Gemara. And he justifies this. You know, we've spoken about before in Tosas Yom Tov, in Nazir, chapter 5, Mishnah 5, the Vilna Gaon does it. And so we know there's this idea of explaining the Mishnah different than the Gemara. But I don't want people to think that this is like Rabbi Dunner or Professor Halivni as a Shita. And Halivni's perspective is that, the Gemara, the Amoraim didn't know certain sources. That's why they gave the answer. No, it's not that at all. It's just that there's pshat in the Mishnah, and then there's what you call drash in the Mishnah. But I do want to give you another example because I'm going through his last sefer. Actually, I said it was his last sefer. It's not his last sefer. A couple days before his death, they published Kovetz Mamarim, his collected articles, volume 3. But his Perush on Breshis, I want to show you something here that he gives another example of this. And I'm going to show you, some of you probably know this Gemara. Very interesting Gemara, how to explain this. He explains it Kabbalistically, but here's a Brachos 57b. It says uh, three matters do not enter the body if the body benefits from them. Shlosha ein nichnasim al guf neneman. What are these three? Washing, we can understand it. Anointing. Anointing, it means like with that this is the thing that you can't do like on Yom Kippur. You know, they used to anoint themselves with these aromas and oils. Vitashmish. And Tashmish. Tashmish, as you see in the this is Safaria, but this is taken from the English, the Koran Gemara, commonly used as a euphemism for conjugal relations. So that's three things do not enter the body, the benefits from them. Then it says, Shlosha mien olam haba. Three things are microcosms. That's how they translate mien here. Uh, some might translate or akin to whatever, but let's take microcosms. Actually, I just since I have you here, let me just tell you what because I have it on my computer here. You can see it right now. Let's see how it's translated. I have the Sonsino from years ago. If I get a new computer, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to but I happen to like having the Sonsino very handy like this. So they translate how they translate it as uh, no, it's I thought we said it's Brachos 57b. Oh, Fez Shabbos, sorry. No one pointed out to me. So Brachos 57b, let's see what Brachos has to say, how they translate this. And then wait till you see what I tell you, what he says. Whether you think it's controversial or not, you'll tell me. But I'm just curious now that we're doing it, how Sansino, no one uses Sansino anymore, but and there's a good reason not to use it, but it's good to change to compare sometimes. So here it says uh, I see the Gemara is giving all sorts of um let's see I can't even find it here. Yes, here it is. Okay, they said three things are a reflex. That's a strange translation of the world to come. Sabbath, sunshine, and tashmish. Now, if I look down note 12, tashmish, literary service. So they don't really explain here what it is, but they'll explain it in a minute. So let's go back to the here. Okay, three matters of microcosm of the world to come. They are the Sabbath, sun, and tashmish, usage. So they say, the Gemara asks, usage of what benefits the body and is a microcosm of the world to come? If you say that it refers to conjugal relations, doesn't it weaken the body? Rather, it refers to usages of his orifices, relieving himself. So here you have the Gemara. The Gemara says that what does it mean? Three things are mein olam haba. One of them is tashmish. The Gemara's conclusion is that tashmish here means relieving yourself. That's what it means. Okay, that's pshat. Now, that's what everyone learning the Gemara comes to conclude. You know what Rav Mazuz says? Nira shahabraisa niskavne kipshuta kefi salkadaita Gemara. He says that really the pshat in the Gemara in the brisa is that tashmish me'ein olam haba means conjugal relations. That's what the brisa means. And Ela shagamara niskavna l'halamin hadvarim. He says that, and he explains that there's basically a mystical thing, what sexual relations, how it has to do with Olam Haba, that sort of thing. And he explains it, and he says the Gemara purposely covered this up. It didn't want the average person to understand this because they're going to start thinking we're like Muslims here. For them, heaven is sexual relations, things like that. But he explains, and Kabbalistic, I don't really understand it, what this means. But he says that pshat it means real tashmish, and he even quotes from Shlomo Alkabetz, who has a whole passage that relates to this. That Shlomo Alkabetz is wondering why there's no bracha. before Tashmish Hamita? Why shouldn't it be a bracha? It's a mitzvah. You get hana out of it. And whatever. We don't need to go into this now, and I'm a little prudish, so I don't want to. But in the end, the upshot is he says that it's that Tashmish is Echan Mishishi Metaganu Kalamiti. So whatever, there's all sorts of comparisons between physical pleasure and spiritual pleasures, etc. Not that there's physical pleasures in Olam Haba, but there's comparisons. And here Rav Mazuz says, it's in his sefer here, Arim Nisi on Brachos, that really the pshat of the Gemara is Tashmish Hamita. That's what the Brisa means. But he has this theory, Rav Mazuz, that in certain places the Gemara said, I said that the Gemara is only supposed to be for the intellectuals. But Rav Mazuz thinks that even in the olden days, you had the masses read the Gemara, and there are certain things that they weren't supposed to know. And therefore, the Gemara presents this pshat, but the Yechidei school, the elite, knows that this is only the pshat for the masses. But the elites, they can handle the truth, like the movie says, and therefore they'll know that the Gemara really means Tashmish Hamita is Me'in Ho'am Haba, not to be understood in a physical sense or anything like that, but it's a mystical understanding. But that's the sort of idea that you can't give to the masses. Can you imagine? They'll go around saying that Tashmish Hamita is like heaven. They'll sound like like the way the Muslims say it. So I think it's interesting. Let us return now with where we are.
You think that Shemesh means solar power, EVs?
Tashmish means solar power?
No, Shemesh.
Shemesh, yes. Okay. So you're saying, well, so what's the relation? The Tashmish means usage. I don't know. Is there a relationship between Tashmish? Tashmish can be used in all different ways also. And Shemesh, are they related?
No, I'm thinking that it's solar power, anticipating solar power.
Okay, well, that's your pshat, but I don't know. I think your other interpretations, and if you haven't seen Gershon's book, a very long book, you'll see all sorts of interesting interpretations. And it's like 600 pages, 800 pages. I don't know, very long.
1,100 pages.
1,100. Okay, sorry. I took 500 off. But full of interesting interpretations. And I have to say those interpretations are better, I think, than the solar power interpretation.
Well, thank you very much. I a big shkoyach to you.
I ordered it from Interlibrary Alone a few months ago, and I was trying to go through it. But I'm not a biblical scholar like you are. But so I can only pick up certain aspects of it. Okay. If you recall, last class I showed you this. We're looking at the defenses now of Rav Goren, and I told you about this rabbi. Let's see. Yes, I don't know if you've heard of him. If you were involved in Mizrahi circles, you would have heard of him. Rav Katriel Tchorsch. He actually has a very nice sefer called Keser Ephraim, with all sorts of shilas about running a state in Israel. He was a leading Mizrahi rabbi, a member of the chief rabbinate, what's that, Rabbanut Harashit, and he was a student of this individual, Rav Kowalski, who's unknown today because his Sfarim were destroyed in the Holocaust. He hadn't printed it yet, but a leading Mizrahi rabbi. And in this book called Harabbanut Harashit, Rabbanut Am Kulo, the chief rabbinate, the rabbinate of everyone, of the nation, so he has an article, and he says that, first of all, it's a big defense of Rav Goren, but he says these attacks on Rav Goren remind me of things already from my youth. He says at the beginning of the Mizrahi movement in Poland, he's a big Mizrahi rabbi, Rav Torsh, and all the rabbis, the young rabbis who joined Mizrahi, I shouldn't say all, but almost all of them, they had to be very brave because they were going against what the old-time rabbis said. Not all. There were some old-time rabbis who joined Mizrahi, but most of the old-time rabbis, even if they were not anti-Mizrahi, they were on the fence. They didn't want to commit one way or the other. So they had to have a lot of bravery to go against their teachers. So he says that among the rabbis who joined Mizrahi was my Rebbe, the Gaon, Rav Yehudah Kook. He was Rosh Yeshiva, and he in Poland, and he was Nasi, the president of Mizrahi in Poland for a while. He was Talmud Muvak of the Rogachover, the Avnei Nezer. And he says a number of times the Rogachover and him met, And the Rogachover tried to convince Rav Kowalski not to be involved with Mizrahi. It's not for you. You're not a Zionist. Oh, you shouldn't be a Zionist. But Rav Kowalski was strong, and despite what his Rebbe, and again, this is also the Hasidic world. In the Misnagdish world, I get you don't listen. I don't think the Meitcheter Eloi, Rav Polachek, needed to have a reason why he could join Mizrahi when his Rebbe, Rav Chaim Brisker, was opposed to it. Because in the Litvische world, you're known to, everyone thinks for themselves. And every Talmud has a brain. And the idea, it's amazing when you think about the old Litvische approach, because today they become Hasidic almost. All the Litvische rabbis coming out with proclamations, who to vote for the WZ, all this, it's so, or not to vote. This is not the old Litvische way. But in the Hasidic world, this was always the way. And Rav Kowalski, I guess because he's a big Talmud Chacham, he didn't listen to what the Rogachover says. And then he says, and in their dramatic last meeting, when the Rogachover wasn't asking nicely, he was demanding that you leave Mizrahi. What did Rav Kowalski say to the Rogachover? He says, I am prepared to listen to your voice, to everything you tell me. Everything, l'chol, he says. Afilu l'dvarim kashim, hakruchim b'sikun hanefesh mamash. Even if you're going to cause me to do something which is a danger to my life. Aval mirayon hamizrachi lo azuz. But Kowalski says to his Rebbe, and again, not just his Rebbe in learning, but Rebbe is Hasidic sense, but I'm not going to give up my loyalty to Mizrahi because I feel ki chashim margish ani with all my soul that bitnuat hamizrachi taloy gorel binyan haaretz akiyum hayadut, that with Mizrahi the future of the land of Israel and the existence of Judaism depends. And he says from that point on there was a break that is between student and Rebbe, and he says that so began the redifos, the attacks on my Rebbe La'in Shir, because once it became clear that the Rogachover was disappointed and that the student didn't listen to what the Rebbe said. In the Hasidic world, you don't listen to the Rebbe said. That's like the worst thing imaginable. Then the persecution against him began. This should remind you, by the way, of Soloveitchik. Or Soloveitchik, who comes from this anti-Zionist background in his famous drasha, Joseph and his brothers, he also explains that he joins Mizrahi because he sees that's what God wants us to do, and it doesn't matter that the other big rabbis disagree with it. Sometimes God himself decides the question. And then he goes on and says, I remember when I was learning in the yeshiva, and the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Kowalski was wrapped in his talis. Letters would arrive sometime. I guess they arrived in the morning, and he would give them to me to open up. And I would read these letters, and I would see all the terrible things they said about my Rebbe. Chirufim v'kidufim, curses that I can't put on writing. And he says, but Rabbi Kowalski, he was not excited about this. It didn't upset him. He simply said to me to stop reading them and to, he says he was mevatel these letters ka'afra da'ara. And then Rabbi Tchorsch says, it appears that this, what I saw, the way my Rebbe was attacked, is repeating itself. Mabul shel hashmatzot v'gidufim ve'iyumim noraim. Yored al ketuvato shel harav rashi mechubad. He says the same thing. The debasement, degrading of which my Rebbe experience is now is falling on Rav Goren. And then he continues. He says that, and he continues along these lines. He says we can't be quiet about this. We have to protest. But then he says, I want to point out something else interesting and unusual, that important rabbis from Chutz Haaretz, including Gedolei Torah, are interfering in matters that affect the land of Israel. They're putting out psakim and involving themselves on matters. And listen to this. Umitarvim inyanim shonim, involving themselves in various matters, b'artzeinu, in the land of Israel, mibli shematzu lenochon levaker ba afilu pa'am achat. Without even having visited the land of Israel one time, they're giving their opinions on what should be done in the Torah or in the land of Israel. This refers obviously to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, because the other rabbis, Rav Moshe had been to Eretz Yisrael, Rav Soloveitchik, he wasn't speaking about these matters. I can't think of anyone else speaking about this in America who hadn't been to Eretz Yisrael, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe famously never went to Eretz Yisrael, and he's from Brooklyn, is trying to tell what should be done in the land of Israel. And Rav Tchorsch sees this as completely inappropriate. He thinks it's inappropriate for any of the Chutz La'aretz rabbis to be interfering in an Eretz Yisrael dispute. Listen to this. Even the Shikru Yerushalayim, the liberation of Jerusalem and the Kotel Ma'aravi, which created such excitement in the Jewish world, did not bring them levaker v'lifkod et sarid beit mikdashenu, to come visit, this remaining piece of the Kotel. And that, by the way, would apply to Rav Moshe also. He never went to after 67. And then he says that this is all part of the attack on our movement, the Mizrahi movement, which is so important. Okay, and then he continues along these lines, and he makes one final point. He says that it's a good point. You might have heard it, but I don't know if you know it goes back to the Mabit. Moshe Ibn Trani, Moshe Trani of, I guess he's 16th century, in his book Beis Elokim. And it's repeated by Kedushas Levi or Ve'etzek Baditchev. You know that we say in the Gemara, it says Teku. You don't know the answer, so sometimes they don't know the answer, say Teku. Now, really, what Teku means is that the matter stands. And it stands for sometime in the future, I guess we'll know, Mashiach or whatever, Eliyahu. But because of this idea, it stands until the future Eliyahu, someone came up with they said, well, really, it's an abbreviation. And I don't know Louis Jacobs has a book called Teku. He probably has the first example of when this is cited as an abbreviation, because it's definitely not an abbreviation. That's like drush abbreviation. But they said, what's the abbreviation? Tishbi Ataretz Kushot V'Yibayu. That Tishbi, Eliyahu, it would be a lot better if the first letter was Aleph. It would be Eliyahu. But okay, so Eliyahu will answer all the questions. So what does the Mabit ask? What do you mean Eliyahu will answer the questions? Why not Moshe Rabbeinu will answer the questions? He's the one who gave the Torah. Or how about, Shmuel HaNavi, Yeshaya HaNavi? What's with Eliyahu here? And so he says as follows. And by the way, he says, when Moshe comes back, when the other Nevi'im, they're not going to know the answer to these questions? Well, what's this with that Eliyahu? He says as follows. He says that those prophets, Moshe and the rest of them, they died and they're up in Shamayim, wherever they are. They have no connection to this world. They don't know about our world. But Eliyahu lives among us, right? He never died. He's among us still. He knows what's going on in this world. And therefore, it's Eliyahu who's going to answer the questions, because the Eliyahu is the only one who's been in this world, and he knows how we're living. He knows our circumstances here. He's connected to this world, so he's the only one who can answer the questions or HaTorah. And he says it's the same thing. He says on matters such as this, the rabbis in Chutz La'aretz, they're not living in Eretz Yisrael. So how can they answer questions? They don't experience what we experience when we're living here. Just like even they're great Torah scholars, but just like Moshe is the greatest, but he's not going to be the one to answer the question because he hasn't been living among them. So too, the rabbis in Chutz La'aretz, they're not living in Eretz Yisrael, so they have no say in this matter. So therefore, he concludes that we have to follow the rulings of the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, that's Rabbi Tchorsch. Another great defense of Rav Goren was Zvi Yehudah Kook. Zvi Yehudah Kook was, of course, very close to Rav Goren. Rav Goren was already as a young man. Rav Goren's born in 1917. Rav Cook dies in 1935. Rav Goren was like the apple of Rav Cook's eye. Rav Goren's first sefer was published with Askama from Rav Cook, and Rav Goren was very close to the Rav Cook, the whole school, Rav Cook, the yeshiva, everything. He was very much, and ideologically, they were very similar. Rav Goren records something. It's one of the greatest vorts of Rav Cook, I think. Rav Goren is the record of it. He was visiting Rav Cook in Hara Carmel by Haifa, and Rav Cook was on vacation towards the end of Rav Cook's life. And Rav Goren, they were outside, relaxing in the nice the forest, whatever they have up there. And Rav Goren had a Gemara, and Rav Cook told him to put the Gemara away. And or actually, I don't know if he told him. I think he told him to put it away. But the importance of the story is what he said. He said that he was told to put a Gemara away. Rav Cook told him the following story. I can't remember if he told Rav Goren or he said that when he once had a Gemara in the forest, he was told to put it away. Here's the story. Rav Cook, when he was a young rabbi, the rabbis used to go to these vacation spots. So he brought a Gemara. So he's sitting there in the forest or the garden and he's learning Gemara. And one of the elder rabbis, unfortunately, Rav Cook does not tell us which rabbi this was, comes up to him and says, put away the Gemara. And Rav Cook, of course, is surprised. What do you mean, put away the Gemara? That's what a rabbi is supposed to say? And the rabbi says as follows, your kahila, and this, I've told this to rabbis and they appreciate this word. Your kahila gives you, even in those days, they gave them vacation, time off, just like rabbis get time off today. He says, your kahila gives you vacation, time off. Why do they give you vacation, time off? They give it to you so you can rejuvenate yourself, your strength. And if you're just going to sit on your vacation and just sit and learn Gemara all day, just like you'd be doing if you were back in the city that you're Rav of, let's say Zoimel, that's one of the two cities he was Rav of, then what do they need to give you vacation? You just remain in your city and you can still be learning the Gemara. The fact that they gave you vacation is because they want you to rejuvenate yourself. They want you to relax. They want you to take walks. They don't want you to focus on so intense. They don't want you to be your head in the Gemara all day. Learn something else, something less, mentally taxing. Otherwise, Rav Cook's, the rabbi told him it's like Geneva from the community. They gave you this time off so you can rejuvenate and come back with strength, ready to pick up where you are. So I think that's very nice. But Rav Zvi Yehudah, there's a book called Berakhot Siburit. They collected all the interviews and articles that Rav Zvi Yehudah, where he's quoted in. His followers did this, and of course he deals with this matter of the Langer case. And he's very strong. But let me read you what Zvi Yehudah says. He says that the sages say that every Talmud Chacham that has a stain on his garb, he's chayiv misa. Not that he's literally going to be killed, but it's as if he's worthy of the death penalty because he brings the Torah into disrepute. You see, this is what a scholar looks like. It's Rashi explains here that they shema misin atzma b'nei abrios. The people say, "Oy lahem lalomdei Torah." They look at them and say, "This is what a Torah scholar is." It's going to push them away. And he says that we see here, and these are Talmidei Chachamim, but a Talmud Chacham who doesn't behave, let's say, in his personal garbs properly, it's a terrible thing. So we see though that it's Talmidei Chachamim. He says we have the same thing today. We have Talmidei Chachamim who use terrible their derachim, their approaches are very bad. And they act as if they're being zealous for God, but really they're causing Torah to be brought into disrepute. He says it's as if they have a psul on their garb. And then he quotes Rav Cook, senior, saying this. And then he's asked in the question, but wait a second. Among the people who oppose Rav Goren, you have great Talmidei Chachamim and Rosh Yeshivot. How do you explain their strong opposition? Rav Zvi Yehudah says, I know many of them, and I'm friends with some of them. And there's a difference, he says, between the responses. Some some of the responses are careful responses, and others are without any control, basically. And he says there's different reasons. Some of them it's for ideological reasons, like their opposition to the chief rabbinate. Some are personal reasons, opposition to Rav Goren, jealousy. But then he says, in Kol HaKavod, he says, I say this to the rabbis. We are not talking about a Gezeres HaKasuv here. We're not talking about something stated in the Torah that we just have to follow. What's the issue? Berur Makorot Eduyot. We're talking about facts on the ground. He says, Harav Harashi Hochiach, Rav Goren proved, Shebamikra Zen Lo Haita Gerut. There was no Gerus. Rav Goren has proven that. And what do the opponents of him do? They don't answer him a question. They don't answer him to the point that, yes, there was a Gerus. Rather, they give these general statements that Rav Goren is undermining Torah and that he's not following the procedures. Rav Zvi Yehudah calls these Hodaot Klariyot Lo Hachachot. And he says, we can't accept it. This is not a matter of Gezeres HaKasuv. It's a matter of proof. Rav Goren proved that there's no evidence that these people, that he was ever converted. The first husband, Berakhot. So he says to the other rabbis, if you think he was, prove it. Show why we should accept it, rather than just these highfalutin statements that Rav Goren's undermining halacha. And then he goes on to says that, the Moetzes Gedolei Torah of Agudas Yisrael opposes the chief rabbinate. So we understand they're going to try to undermine it, but that's not halacha. And then he says, and this is a dig, it's a dig against like Rav Shach and this type, where it's not a dig against Rav Yecheskel Abramsky. He says, these Rosh Yeshivot, Kvodam Bimkamam Munach, we respect them, but on the whole, what do? Oskim b'pilpul d'oraisa. They spend their time in shiurim and pilpul, v'lo b'piskei halachot l'maseh, but they're not involved in practical halacha. And it's a good point. At the end of the day, Rav Goren's a dayan. He's involved in halacha. He has. Now we saw there were dayanim who opposed him as well, but some of the biggest opposition to Rav Goren were from rabbis who never paskined a shaila on a beis din, and never paskined a shaila in Even Ezer. And Rav Zvi Yehudah's point is that they're not the people who should be involved in this at all. So that's the second important defense. So, Rav Zvi Yehudah Kook becomes, a major figure in the religious Zionist world. His influence in the Haredi world is zero. But in the religious Zionist world in Israel, he was very important. What about Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav? So first, let me say that Rav Goren used to come to Yeshiva University a lot. And I found pictures of him. He used to speak. The Rav would give his shiur to Rav Goren. So these are some interesting pictures I found. The Rav was not short. And then you can see it's a blog post. Here's a picture, by the way. That's Rav Charlap. He didn't have a beard then. The Rav Goren, Dr. Belkin, and Rabbi Israel Miller. I found these in the Israel archives. And here's Rav Goren giving a shiur at YU. So what date is it? I found the date also because there was advertisements. It's in May. This was the exact date was I have it here, I think. Okay, spring of 1972. Yeah, in May of 1972. Oh, I got it here. I went to the commentator. This is a blog post I did. May 17th, it mentions that Rav Goren spoke on May 3rd, 1972. So May 3rd, 1972, that's actually before the decision of the Goren dispute came down. It came down only in Kislev, November of that year. But by then, everyone knew Rav Goren's position on it, and the Haredim were already attacking Rav Goren. So we see that, of course, YU opened its arms for him, and Rav Soloveitchik did. And after the Langer dispute, when Rav Goren was basically a persona non grata in any of the yeshivas of the Haredi world, because before that he wasn't. I heard from someone that he would go to the Chevron Yeshiva. Rav Yecheskel Abramsky was very fond of him. But after the Langer dispute, basically the only way he could speak at Hesder yeshivas in Israel, but in America, he was always welcome at YU and at the RCA convention. He couldn't go to Agudas Rabbanim anymore, but he can go to the RCA convention. So it's of interest to know what was the Rav's position on this matter, Rav Soloveitchik. I have to say that the Rav refused to publicly attack Rav Goren or to publicly defend him. So when we want to figure out the Rav's position, it's going to be, there's nothing going to be on the record per se. Zalman Shazar, the president of the state of Israel, comes to America because of this dispute. He goes to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and is not able to get the Rebbe to back down. He goes to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and Rav Moshe doesn't want to discuss the issue. He goes to the Rav, and he wanted to show the Rav the psak that Rav Goren issued, and the Rav refused to look at it. He didn't want to get involved. In other words, he's not attacking the psak. He's not supporting. He just doesn't want to get involved. There was a rumor in the end of December of 1972 that Rav Soloveitchik supported the psak. So in the Jewish Observer, if you look at the Jewish Observer, December 1972, page 18, you will find there that it says that Rav Moshe called the Rav who denied that he supported, gave support publicly or even privately to Rav Goren's psak. However, we have another book that it's called Rogachover Aaron, collected essays of Rabbi Rakefet. And what I'm holding right now, volume, I think this is volume 5 or 5, I forget now. No, volume 3, sorry. And this is different than the other 2 volumes, which were Rabbi Rakefet's articles that he published. This is, I think the entire volume is this way. There's this person, Yaakov Weinstein, who took Rabbi Rakefet's shiurim. He's been giving shiurim for years and years online, and he put them into, he wrote them up, basically. And Rabbi Rakefet read them over, so he edited things, and he has pages and pages on the Langer case. In fact, this was mentioned a few weeks ago. So if you look at pages 227 and on, well, first, Rabbi Rakefet gives his opinion. He said he agrees with Rav Goren. He says that Rav Goren properly put together snifim. Snifim are arguments to cast doubt on the Langer status of mamzerim. As in all such cases, no one snif is completely immune to arguments, but each creates a source of doubt. This point alone, which we have seen undergirds all mamzeret questions, counters Rav Jolti and the other halachic responses to Rav Goren's decision. He says nothing Rav Goren said is even remotely as revolutionary as Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank's application of Bittul Haget, annulling the bill of divorce. That Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank did this by the Marsham's idea that the husband sends the get and then abolishes the shlichut, and ex post facto from the ab initio, from the beginning, it's as if they're not married. So Rabbi Rakefet asks, why did Rav Goren's decision cause such an uproar? Look, the answer is clear. If this was Rosh Zalman Auerbach, it wouldn't be an uproar. But Rav Goren had already locked heads with the Rosh Yeshiva and the Haredi Rabbanim on other matters. He had a whole different approach to halacha. So this was coming on top of years of him pushing the boundaries. He wanted to create a halacha, which we could call it a mamlachtiyut type of halacha, that really takes seriously what it means to be a free people in the land of Israel, and that you need a new type of halacha based on the earlier sources, but not bound to them in the way that people used to be. That is, we need originality, because you can't just open the Rambam or the Shulchan Aruch and assume that this applies to a modern state where Jews are running the show. So he says, well, this is the quote, this is the summary of it. At this time of this case, Rabbi Rakefet attempted to understand the backlash against Rav Goren. And he asked Rabbi Emmanuel Holzer, who was a confidant of the Rav. Rabbi Holzer was very, very close to Rabbi Soloveitchik. So he asked, and his sons all were Gabayim of the Rav. I was in Long Island a couple months ago when I had Shabbos lunch with one of the sons of Rabbi Holzer. That was a great experience. I spent Pesach a few years ago with another son who lives in Florida. He put together the different Sfarim of Rav Soloveitchik. So according to Rabbi Rekefet, he says he asked Rabbi Holzer why the Rav did not support Rav Goren. And Rav Holder explained that the Rav did back Rav Goren, but wouldn't do it publicly, only privately. He said he didn't want to get involved in Israeli politics. So I don't think this necessarily contradicts what the Jewish Observer said. Rav Moshe calls the Rav, and the Rav says, "No, I'm not telling you know." He said, I'm not taking a stand on this." And the Rav didn't take a stand. But this doesn't mean that privately, according to Rabbi Holzer, what he was told by the Rav privately told people that Rav Goren's, well, again, it's hard to know when he said he backed Rav Goren. We're going to have this problem when we get to Rav Henkin. What does it mean backed him? Backed him could mean two things. It can mean that the Rav agreed with the psak, but that's impossible to say because the Rav never read the psak, as far as we know. And so I don't think that's what it means. What it means is, he backed him, that Rav Goren is enough of a Talmud Chacham and is enough of a Rav that you can rely on his opinion. If he says it, you can rely on it. And that he should be given kavod, just like any other posek. Just like if the Rav heard that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach issued a psak, he doesn't need to read the psak to know that if Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, I might not agree with it. The Rav's position might be, if I read the psak, I might not agree with it. But that doesn't mean that Rav Goren is not enough of authority that he could issue this. That's, I think, what it means, and we'll see with Rav Henkin the exact same thing. And then Rabbi Rekefet asked Rav Lichtenstein for his opinion. And Rav Lichtenstein said that Rav Goren's arguments have a lot of validity, but the rabbis were worried that Rav Goren is an innovator and one who will dance to the tune of the politicians. Again, remember, that was the issue. The issue, they thought that Rav Goren was a quid pro quo to become chief rabbi. The politicians will make him chief rabbi if he solves this problem. And they thought he was an innovator. Rav Goren has all these, it's not just, Rav Goren's telling people they can go on the, he wanted to, that he didn't publicize it, but he go on the Temple Mount, and we can come up with a doctor can become a Cohen can become a doctor. Rav Goren came up with his shita. You wear this what is it, the metal thing on? I mean, he came up with everything Rav Goren touched is original. So he's coming up with all these original ideas. If he came up with one original idea here and there, but when he's coming up with original ideas all the time, but from Rav Goren's perspective, we need to use these original ideas. We need to use individual opinions, das yachids, things like that, because we have a new reality we never had. We're living in the state of Israel, Jews running their own show, their own destiny, and therefore we need a different type of halacha, one which is more dynamic. Rav Rekefet, he goes a little further, and he says that his opinion is that the different Batei Din were simply not motivated to find grounds for leniency for people who were not religious. Rabbi Rekefet feels, now the Dayanim would say that this is a canard, but this is what Rabbi Rekefet thinks. He thinks that in dealing with people who are not religious, who are probably they'll do what they want anyway, even though the Langer kids said they want a heter and they refused to marry before they got it. But he says that the Batei Din were simply not motivated to find grounds for leniency for people who are not religious. And it's not their issue. Just like Rav Goren, from the Haredi perspective, like how to run a police force on Shabbos. It's not their concern. Their attitude is that the irreligious are going to run the police force. We're not going to be in it. So, but Rav Goren, and when you think of someone like Rav Goren has to explain how a police force runs on Shabbos, because presumably we want everyone to be religious. So therefore, he'll come up with all sorts of ideas that maybe you have to, do right with disappearing ink, when they arrest the person. All these things that a police force needs to do. From the Haredi perspective, none of this makes any sense. But if you believe you need to run a police force on Shabbos, and you can go down the list, therefore you're going to need to come up with all sorts of solutions which would have been unimaginable years ago. From the Haredi world, it's not a concern for them. And so that's Rabbi Rekefet's point, that the Haredi rabbis did not have a Klal Yisrael perspective. I'll just, in their defense, though, it's not just the Haredi rabbis, Roshal Yisraeli, Rav Yosef. So it's a complicated case. It's absolutely complicated. I want to tell you, before I get to Rav Henkin, I think it's going to be the last of the Gedolim we deal with, and not really the end of it. I want to tell you about Saul Lieberman, though, because one of Rav Goren's good friends from when Rav Lieberman lived in Jerusalem till like 1940 or 39. He knew Rav Goren very well, and he would go back to Eretz Yisrael, and he knew Rav Goren, so they corresponded. And Rav Goren writes to Lieberman, and we don't have this letter, I think, of Rav Goren. We have other letters. I'll tell you what he says, but we have Lieberman's response. And Lieberman says, first of all, Lieberman says he spoke to the Rabbonim in Israel about this matter, but then Lieberman says, I'm not going to speak publicly about it. Why won't I speak publicly about it? Lieberman understood very well. He says, if I were to speak publicly about it, he says this would only hurt you. Why? Hakanaim Yomru, the zealots would say, Nimtza od Rav conservativi shemaskim Rav Rashi. Matzah minat mino. They simply would say that what? Lieberman, he's a conservative rabbi, so what do you expect? Of course he's going to agree with Rav Goren. But he says, but to you, I'm going to write the truth. Yevarechotcha Hashem, v'yeshar kochacha. He says, ani makir, I know your Torah and your Yirat Shamayim. Uvatuach ani. He says, I'm certain that you are correct. But we have a very interesting letter from Rav Goren to Lieberman in dealing with this. More than one letter, but one I want to call your attention to. And in my little booklet, Saul Lieberman and the Orthodox, page 9, I published it. I found these in the archives of the Jewish Theological Seminary. Listen, and Rav Goren writes to Lieberman Tevis, 26th of Tevis, 1973, December 31st, 1970. There's 31 days in December, right? Or how many days in December? 31? Okay, because he says on his letter December 31. Yeah. He thanks thanks Lieberman for writing to him and giving him encouragement. And he says, you know what I've been through these last days. And he cites some Talmudic passages of rabbi, some biblical verses talk about going through difficult times. And he says, this is, I've gone through even worse than that. But then he says as follows, but I'm happy to say this following. I never felt free to decide, to give halachic decisions in accordance with my conscience, like I do now. He says, I've been freed. Hishtachararti Baruch Hashem mikol machshavat hapsulot sheitrudu oti tamid. He says, I've been freed from all the inappropriate thoughts I used to have. In other words, I always was thinking, what are they going to say about me? I was worried. They're going to attack me. Can I say this? But he says, now I'm able to fulfill what Chazal tell us, Ein l'dayan ela ma she'einav ro'ot. A dayan should only do what his eyes see, not be concerned. What's going to happen? What are they going to say? And we know rabbis are always concerned with this. They're always afraid if they say something, they could be attacked. And he says, I was afraid also, but now I'm not afraid. And he says, just like we make a bracha on the bad things, just like on the good. He says, I say that b'di'evad, this was good. In other words, I used to be worried, and therefore I wouldn't always say my mind. But now they don't accept me. So since they don't accept me anyway, then I can actually speak my mind the way I really believe. So in the end, it's a good thing. He says that the Reshit Chachma b'Hanaga Ruchanit Tziburit, that is the beginning, the most important thing of spiritual leadership, is that the posek should be Shalei Mimatzmo, V'lo Sagur Mipnei Ish, and not to be afraid. And he says, therefore, I'm not going to back off, and I'm not going to, turn away. It's a very fascinating thing he's saying. And he used to be worried about giving his opinion because they were going to attack him. But now, since they don't hold of him anyway, he can decide halacha the way he sees fit. And he says, this week I'm publishing the book, which I explain my psak. So fascinating. One final thing I want to mention, and next class we'll do with Rav Henkin, and we'll go into the Seidman case. Rav Goren, he's thrown out of the Haredi world, but there was still a great rabbi from the Haredi world. I consider him in the Haredi world, although he really crossed the boundaries, and his name was Razam Nechemia Goldberg. Now, when Rav Goren passed away in 1997, they came out with a Sefer Zikaron, and it's all the religious Zionist rabbis, but Rav Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg has an article in there. And this is Rav Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg giving honor to him. But it's more than that. I discovered also in the archives in Israel, and I published it and in my blog post. Here is a lengthy letter, 3 pages, from Rav Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg to the family of Rav Goren after he passed away. And from this letter, by the way, we see that Rav Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg gave shiurim at Rav Goren's yeshiva, Ha'idra. That's in the old city. When you go into the Kotel courtyard, you look to the left. That's where it was. You still see the sign there, but now it's taken over by Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh. And in this letter, he talks about as when he was a young man, seeing Rav Goren, who would just sit there and learn day and night, nonstop. And you see you see Rav Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg's great respect for Rav Goren. So, and he becomes, of course, an important guy in Eretz Yisrael. So this idea that it was Rav Goren up against the Gedolim, it's not true. Yes, there were Gedolim against him, of course, many. But Rav Goren had great figures on his side as well. And we're going to see next class where we will end next class dealing with the Langer case, but I'll start it next class, and I think we'll need one more class after that. There was one other dispute that occurred right around this time called the Seidman case, which is related to the Langer case, and that it deals with conversion. You'll find that interesting, and we'll get into that as well. But most of next class will deal with Rav Yosef Eliel Henkin, because he also becomes a support for Rav Goren. And then the big one. I'll tell you who it is, just to whet your appetite. Rav Chaim Zimmerman. Rav Chaim Zimmerman becomes an outspoken supporter of Rav Goren in this whole thing, and wait till you see what Rav Chaim Zimmerman has to say. And he was a character, as I think most people here know. We've spoken about Rav Chaim Zimmerman a lot in the past. So let me note where I stopped right now and look at the comments and questions. Rabbi Kalman says that Ramosha says there's no ribit if a corporation is the borrower. But the question is, the Rogachover speak about an individual as the borrower because the bank is not Jewish, and since the bank isn't Jewish, there's no ribis.
Of course, I'm talking about, let's say, Jews, like in business all the time. Jews do business with Jews. So if it's done through a corporation, I believe Ramosha is only the lova. The malveh cannot collect interest, but the lova can. If the lova is a corporation, this gets into the big question.
Why? Because Ramosha held that when it comes to like chametz, if the majority, didn't he say that if the majority?
No. Let's say it's a totally Jewish corporation, 100% Jewish corporation. Because it's a corporation, Ribis doesn't. But I have to look up the exact.
But then you'd have to explain why Ribis is different than things like chametz, where Ramosha says, or tevilas kalim. He raises it as a possibility, but he says no. Maskana is that you do you do need
in general,
if you buy it from a corporation, you do need to sell your chametz, a corporation. I mean, so he does distinguish it. He raises the issue about tevila kalim that it shouldn't be a problem at all if it comes from a corporation. But in the end, he says no. So I'd like to know what the difference is between ribis and these other matters where Moshe doesn't go that far. David says that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, when he once went into an overdraft, accidentally asked not to be charged interest. The bank manager said that it would only be fair to charge him interest. And he takes interest from the bank, as he takes interest from the bank when his account is positive. And Rav Shlomo Zalman retorted that's different for the bank, since as a corporation, it is not a person. He as an individual cannot pay ribis. But again, David, what do you mean he can't pay ribis? I don't understand this. If ribis, you need two to tango. He could pay ribis to a non-Jew. And that's the whole point, that the bank is not a person. You need a Jew. It's not ribis unless you pay it to a Jew. So
an Israeli bank is a Jew.
Well, not according to the Rogachover. That's my point. Okay, you're right. So according to everyone else, yeah, according to everyone else. So according to the standard view, so an Israeli bank would be a yeah. You're right, absolutely. So that's I was thinking like the Rogachover, David. Correct. So as far as I know, no one accepts the Rogachover on this, and that's why we all have heteriskas on these banks. And you say that
Yeah,
Revuchnas
David actually has the quote, has the source. If you read it, which I did,
yeah.
that's what it says.
Yeah.
I got it
No, it makes
accurately.
perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. I was thinking like the Rogachover. I thought you were explaining the Rogachover. Yes, of course. But I still don't understand what Rabbi Kalman, if you can find for Ramosha. Look, the bank, David, the bank, well, no, he says it's different because it's a corporation. Hold on, now I don't understand something though. The bank, okay, so the bank has the heter iska, so the bank can pay. Is that it? That's why the bank, is it the bank can pay interest because of a heter iska, or bank can pay interest because of its corporation? Because if the reason is it's a corporation, then we said it's a Jewish corporation. It shouldn't matter.
In Israel, all the banks have a heteriska. I don't understand the story with Rav Shlomo, but
No. So if you have a heteriska, that only helps the
right.
bank give you
No,
interest. You
heteriska
can't
helps
give
both ways.
the bank interest.
People in Israel pay and receive interest because they rely on the heteriska. That's how the banks
No,
work.
but the heteriska allows the bank to pay you interest. It doesn't allow you to pay the bank interest. You don't have a heteriska.
Yeah, sure it does. In a heteriska, the person can pay interest. A heteriska is a two-way street.
It's automatically two-way. I don't know
Yeah,
such
of course. Every heteriska is two ways.
I thought it was only one way.
No, it has to be
No, okay.
heteriska is two ways. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense.
Even if you don't sign it, if I have a if I have bank, I have
Oh, right. So that's the thing. So I don't know how they work it in Israel. My understanding is otherwise, what you don't think religious Jews go into overdraft and pay interest?
No, of course they do. But I'm just saying that if the bank, if the bank has if you have a heteriska and you lend me money, so then I can pay interest. But does that mean I'm allowed to lend you money and charge you interest because you have a heteriska?
No. We have a heteriska, me and you. So when you open up a bank account, I don't know how the rabbanim.
So it goes both ways? Okay, I never learned
the
laws.
assumption
I
is by
never learned
opening
the
a bank
halachas
account,
on
you're
this.
agreeing to the heteriska, so they can charge you interest.
Okay, I never learned Hilchos Ribis. You're saying that the heteriska from the bank.
If I go into business here with you and we sign a heteriska, of course I can charge you interest. That's
You can, yes, but if by me putting my
and
money
you can
in
pay
your
the
bank,
interest,
that
and you can
means
pay
I'm
the
already a
interest.
part of it.
So that's the point. When the banks have this automatic heteriska, I don't exactly know how it works, but otherwise you couldn't have banking in Israel. You could close down the country.
Yeah,
I mean, he couldn't do banking. Let's talk about Rav Goren. You need to find. I mean, the same way the heteriska was to allow people to do business in a modern state of Israel. If you don't have heteriska bank, close up the economy.
Yeah, obviously you're right. And now I think about it, every religious Jew, you couldn't pay any interest.
Right.
But I'll look into it. I've never actually learned Hilchos Ribis.
You're too much of an academic. You sit in the ivory tower. I worked as an
I think Mel has something to say.
So what
Mel?
can I tell you?
Hold on, Mel, were you saying
I've seen heteriscus in the business world, like real talk,
Okay, I think Mel has something to say.
I just said when there's a heteriska between two individuals, it's for one to pay interest to the other. It doesn't work both ways. Just as you're saying.
But he's saying that's what I thought. That's what I assumed. But Rabbi Kelman's correct. There must be some way in Israel when you open a bank account. David, do you know anything? David Eisen? I mean, when you open a bank account, you must be, because otherwise every Jew in Israel, they're all on overdraft. They're all paying interest. How does that work? It must.
Right. It's a heteriska. The bank writes a person gives a heteriska so we can charge interest. That's why somebody writes a heteriska. The borrower doesn't want to pay interest. So the lender always wants a heteriska. So the bank is lending you money. I mean, when you go into overdraft, the bank is lending you money. So the bank has a heteriska so they can collect interest from you. That's basically how it works. And if you didn't have that, no bank could operate in Israel.
My understanding is that Rav Shlomo Zalman had a chumrah that it was a doraisa, and the heteriska only worked.
I understand. He had such fine, but
actually, I don't even know what I'm thinking. Of course, what I'm saying. That's the whole idea, Bill. That's the whole idea of heteriska.
Right.
And I get the heteriska. You now not only can I lend it, but you can pay it back. That's
correct. That's the whole point, of course.
Yeah. So I don't know what I was thinking, but and I was confused because I was thinking what David said. Roshom Zalman Arbach. He didn't want to, so you're saying that's his chumrah. Okay, but the problem is the bank doesn't hold to that chumrah. They want their money.
That's what I don't understand about this story. The bank doesn't hold from the chumrah. You can't.
Yeah. Well, read the hesped from Rabbi Lichtenstein that David posted where he quotes the story. And then you can,
Yeah. No, I know the hesped. I didn't remember that
Yeah.
part. I remember that's the hesped I've quoted in the past where he says that Rav Lichtenstein wasn't sure how his daughters could get their ears pierced. He thought it might be chavala. So he went to Rav Shlomo Zalman. Rav Shlomo Zalman said, nah, the practice is from like age 3 or whatever. Early on, that's the practice. We always put earrings in their ears. So I remember that. And I remember Yonah Emanuel. He was the editor for years and years of the journal Hamayan. He told me that of all the Hespedim of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the best one was Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. Because you could see all the other Hespedim are just quoting Gemaras, this and that. When you read Rav Aaron Lichtenstein's Hesped, you get a sense of who the person was and what he stood for. And you need to be able to express yourself a certain way. Okay, I thank you all, and well, I think Rabbi Kelman looks like we'll have 2 more classes, but it's okay. I think I need to be finished in 3 because my daughter's graduation, I believe, is in 3, Memorial Day. So
You had said till May 12th, but I know whenever you say it's
no,
okay.
till
That's all.
Memorial Day, which I believe is Yom Yerushalayim. That day at least I can't be here, so hopefully maybe we'll finish it in 2 more classes.
That's
And
Victoria Day. Talking about Canada, we begin, and as we begin, Hockey Canada, May 19th. You never even heard of Victoria Day. Oh, yeah. Before Queen Elizabeth.
But I go
Victoria
back.
held the
May
record.
28th, though, Yom Yerushalayim. I believe that's Memorial Day. And but okay, good. Well, we're having fun. Things are good. And by the way, anyone who's interested, if you listen, Rabbi Scott Kahn has a podcast called The Orthodox Conundrum. Very interesting podcast. So I think the expression is, what is it? They dropped it or whatever. He did an interview with me about my new book on Rav Cook. And so you can check it out if you're so inclined. Okay,
where's the podcast? Where's the podcast?
It's called, you know what? I'll hold on a second, one more second. I will send the link right now. It's called The Orthodox Conundrum. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Those of you who are on the online, hold on a second. I will put it in the chat. Where is it? Okay, here it is. For those of you who listen to podcasts, I mean, it's on YouTube also, but here I'll type it in so anyone could see. Those are 3 separate things in there: Spotify, Apple, and Jewish Coffee House. So if anyone,
Okay, when you're talking about podcasts, I'll put in a plug for the podcast of Jewish Ideas. I don't know how many people have listened to it. JJ Kimke for the last couple of years. You're doing a podcast for Torah Motion. It's really phenomenal. I don't think there's anything like it in the Jewish world. The range of speakers and the topics, it's really, really, I give a 10-minute podcast on the Parsha. Okay, so, there are 1,000 people who talk on the Parsha, but this is really something unique. And I do recommend, we've had, I think, about 62 or 63 sessions.
And the fact that he's able to speak intelligently.
Correct. No, it's really
about all these topics from Bible to philosophy to
the range is unbelievable. The last one was on Chassidut, Rachel Elior from Hebrew University. Is really phenomenal. And so,
what's the name? The name?
The one it's on the Torah Motion website. It's a Torah Motion podcast, the podcast of Jewish ideas. If you type in the podcast of Jewish ideas, JJ Kimke, who's finishing his PhD at Harvard.
He finished. He now is
he did finish. He's doing a postdoc. Okay, but really, he's from England. He was in the Israeli army, and he's really, really phenomenal. And you hear it's very good. He interviews people. It's an intellectual Jewish intellectual thought, and I highly recommend it. And Baruch Hashem, lots of people listen to it. And once we're
I can also tell you that he did a podcast, like a 4-part podcast on the Sforim Chatter about conflicts over Kabbalah, which is fascinating in and of itself. But of course, the Torah in Motion, all these things should be when it's not your day and not night, as the sages say, because the main focus should be Torah in Motion podcast. Okay, Rabbi Kelman. Thank you.
Okay, hold on. I was just looking for the podcast thing. I can put it in.
I put it on.
Oh, there you go.
Posted it.
Yeah, but also you can find it on any of your podcast just go to Spotify or any of
Right. If you register, whatever it's called, you'll get a link automatically when it goes on. Otherwise, you can find them through our Motion website. Like there are people, when it goes up, it gets automatically in Spotify. I don't know. So I don't. This is the new. We're a little bit. We're not the generation that comes from podcasts. What can I say? But it really is. I highly recommend it, and I mean, it's not just because it's Storm Motion, but of course, Storm Motion does excellent stuff. But it really is very. I don't think you'll find anything like it out there. The range. So he did a fight. Okay, Marc was interviewed a long, long time ago on it, right? You're one of the first ones. But,
number 3, I think. Yeah.
But really, the range and okay, and up tomorrow, Rabbi Shulman. And also this Thursday, talking about things that you won't find anywhere else. Once we're on the topic, Barry Kleinberg, who is you don't know him. Did I ask you? No, you know he is Marc. You know Barry Kleinberg. Of course you know him. Yeah, of course you know him. You told
I
me
made the shidduch.
Yeah, you made the shidduch a little bit, right? So we came in Toronto. Barry Kleinberg is doing a PhD at Haifa. He lives in London, England. He's a Sachs scholar. The first, so he's doing a 6-part series. It's called Unorthodox, Non-Traditional Thinkers Talk About Traditional Judaism, something like that. Then Eric Fromm, Martin Buber, Cynthia Ozak is going to go through basically quote unquote non-from people talking about.
She's from, isn't she religious, Cynthia Ozak?
I don't know. I don't know, but he called it thoughts on tradition from non-traditional people. So I don't something like that. But that's beginning on Thursday, a 6-part series. So just I don't know. I think it's very interesting. Martin Buber clearly wasn't, and he says if it goes well, he'll do like Emil Fackenheim. He'll do some of the great important thinkers who weren't necessarily observant, but have other things to offer. Okay. But anyways, okay, all our regular shir. So that's starting this Thursday. And tomorrow is Rabbi Shulman, and Wednesday night is Rabbi Elfgod. And of course, Thursday night's Barsha. Friday's my sitter class. Got enough to keep you busy. Like I say, when it's lo yom velo lila, you can do everything else. Okay, that's to watch the hockey games when it's lo yom velo lila. Dr. Shavi, Paul, are you like you follow hockey still now that you're in New York? Or you left the Maple Leafs behind from your days in Toronto? What can I say? That the Maple Leafs didn't win a playoff round probably the 15 years you were in Toronto. I think they missed the playoffs like 8 years in a row when you were here. So anyway,
but still, there's like what, a 10-year waiting list for season tickets more.
Oh yeah, I mean Toronto, I think is considered the hockey capital of the world. Yeah. It's like the most intense fans. It's like they haven't won a Stanley Cup, as people here all know, since 1967. So it's a long time. Right. Anyways.
A rivalry between Toronto and Montreal.
Yeah, but it's not much of a rivalry anymore. But
Montreal considers itself the capital. So what?
Yeah, Montreal. Listen, growing up as a kid, Toronto, Montreal. That was on hockey night in Canada, Saturday nights. That's what we did. But
that's right.
But that was that was it. But of course, I didn't watch. I told you the story. If anybody's interested in it, on Ken Dryden. You know who Ken Dryden is? Ken Dryden won 6 Stanley Cups with the Montreal Canadiens. He was their goalie. He's also a lawyer. He was also a cabinet minister in Canada, very bright. He was our member of Parliament where we live here in York Center, of course, and we just had an election last week. So he was our member of Parliament for a number of years, and he was in the cabinet. And we usually get a summer student. The government pays for us to hire a summer student as part of a government program, nonprofit. So it's done by the local member of Parliament. So usually they come, they visit, they want to see. So one day, Ken Dryden, I think I told the story once. Ken Dryden called us at Torah Motion a number of years ago, and I answered the phone. He says, "Hi, it's Ken Dryden." So I said, "I have to tell you something." I said, "Growing up, I was a Chicago Blackhawk fan. Don't ask me why. And I have not forgiven you for what you did in the 1971 NHL Finals against the Blackhawks in Game 7. That save you made on Jim Pap. I was like 9 years old, 10, and we started laughing. He started really. It was very fun. I said, I haven't watched a hockey game in 25 years. They were talking about hockey, but that was just very interesting. That's the culture. Hockey is the sport more than baseball and football and all those other things. But okay. But now that the Leafs, whatever. Okay, I'll go see what they're doing. Okay, nobody has to hear about this. But anyways, learning Torah, that's what it's all about. Okay. Rav Lichtenstein was a great sports fan, as everybody knows. So that's once we're on that topic. Okay, I think we can.
Too.
I'm sorry.
Rabbi Rakeffet too.
Rabbi Rakeffet has a great. Yeah,
writes in his book.
Rakeva is
His-
he says his best shear he ever gave was the
And Joe
Hesped
DiMaggio.
on Joe DiMaggio. He claims that's the best shear he ever gave on Hesped on
Yeah.
Joe DiMaggio. Yeah. And
Rav
listen,
Lichtenstein was also a great athlete.
who was a great athlete.
Rav Lichtenstein.
Yes, I never played basketball with him in Gush, but he used to play with the guys. Did he play when you were there?
No, in YU only.
Oh, YU, you mean he was a great athlete too? Yeah, listen, Rav Lichtenstein was great in so many ways. It's really a very, very special person.
I played with his son, Rav Meir, however.
Yeah, I don't
He's also
know.
very good.
Right. But anyways, okay. Very good.
Interesting. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you, Lila Tov. Thank you.